This is the BEnergyAware Podcast. When it comes to self-care, I don't think there are any exceptions. Self-care is equally important for all highly sensitive people. You can ask any highly sensitive person, for example, how lack of sleep influences them. Answers are going to be pretty much the same. We cannot function well without proper self-care. I'm Bran, your host, and in this episode of the BEnergyAware Podcast, my guest is Laree Griffith, who through her podcast called Healthy and Creative, shares about health and wellness, and especially about how to use our diet to live a happier and healthier life. We talk about all the things around self-care that can make a difference for the better for highly sensitive people.
As a highly sensitive person, I've always felt a need to take care of myself because you just kind of have to do that, or you kind of have a meltdown, or I do at least when I don't take care of myself. So, but I never really knew what that actually meant or why. I didn't quite understand it. I used to think that meant, something was wrong with me, that I had to retreat and had to take to hide away kind of and take care of myself. I thought that was a defect or a problem. And then as I got older, I guess just in the last 10 years, people started talking about introversion and or introverts and extroverts. And just recently I'd heard the term highly sensitive person. That was, I think, a couple of years ago. Um, and I just started looking at it more and realizing that it was, it wasn't a defect. It was just the way I was. It was the personality, and there wasn't anything wrong with me or the people that I was having trouble relating to. It was just this dynamic of two personalities coming together. I wasn't less than they were, and they weren't more than I was. And I used to think that I was less than because I couldn't, I couldn't be an extrovert. I thought that was something that you you chose to do, but it's not. You can't force yourself to be an extrovert, and you don't have to. There's no reason to. And when I started accepting that part of me, I started learning how to not hide behind it, but instead learn to, take better care of myself, and to not, how do I say it, to not spend so much time hiding behind that personality trait. Instead, thinking of ways to do the things I want to do in the world, and not acting like I have some sort of sickness or some defect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, it does.
And then I realized that that eating and food had a big impact on some of those personality traits that just made them worse, or harder to deal with. Like, for instance, if I didn't get enough sleep, I would just things would just I would be even more sensitive and more irritable, or more, just a lot of mind chatter would start happening. And if I ate the wrong foods, of course, I noticed I was just a lot more sensitive and a lot more withdrawn from attempting to do the things that I wanted to do. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then I decided that, and not just the highly sensitive part, but I noticed food and nutrition in my own family. My daughter had ulcerative colitis, and when she got it 20 years ago, it was all about, well, nobody knows how you get it or why you get it, or there's nothing you can do about it but take pills. And so I realized that food did have a lot to do with that, and with a lot of people's conditions that he had. Like my mother had diabetes, and um, I had friends that had a lot of digestive issues, and I just started studying how food was related to all that. And I think it's a huge a huge part of our health problems nowadays is the foods that we eat.
Yeah. So if there's one thing in general around self-care that you consider to be most important, would that be food or
I think the most important thing is self-awareness. When I think of self-care and health, I think of it as I don't think of them as separate. Sleep and food, the food you eat, relationships, and your environment and exercise. I think those are all part of self-care, and I don't think that one of them is really more important than the other. I think that I think they're all kind of related. So it's kind of you can't just eat right and then expect that everything's going to be fine. I mean, you can still be unhealthy and not well even if you eat right.
yeah.
Um, so you
Mhm.
have to take all those things into consideration. Learning how to not so much balance, but to just be aware of those things, your health and your relationships and your environment and your exercise and the food that you eat.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
me, when someone says self-care, number one thing that comes up for me, oh, yeah, my alone time.
Yeah, and I don't know why I didn't mention that because that's probably is the biggest thing for me. um, yeah, so definitely alone time. I totally agree with that. I spend a lot of time by myself, and I work from home, so it's I get a lot of alone time. But it is important because when I did work in corporate and I was around people all day long, yeah, it was very important to make sure that I spent time by myself and to have time to think and to write and to meditate or just be, just to be without input coming in all the time.
Yeah. Well, highly sensitive people get burned out easily, especially if they're in a fast-paced environment. If that's someone's job situation, at work, where it's a fast-paced, high-pressure corporate environment, that would, be really devastating for them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and any type of crowds.
Yeah. And again, when someone says self-care, I think about, hey, how do we take that time and figure out how to protect ourselves from all these different kinds of energies that would overwhelm us? Or if we are in a certain situation and then there's all kinds of things that can happen, and then we take that energy home with us. And then we still feel overwhelmed when we get home and we're deeply upset for a couple of days. We don't know how to stop that, how to get rid of it. So these are some of the things that I like to mention in these kinds of conversations because it does, to me, does relate to self-care quite a bit. For me, that's self-care, to be able to realize it and to know how to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best things I've learned the last couple of years is just simple meditation. Just taking 5 minutes between, like when you come home or you get done talking on the phone or have a stressful conversation, or is to actually take the time to just close your eyes for 5 minutes and do some deep breaths and little things like that. I myself, I write like I just grab paper and just start writing. Just whatever I'm feeling or
Hmm. Hmm.
um, getting it out of my head. I think that's really important for me to just let those feelings out.
Yeah, that's a really good way. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Writing works for a lot of people, a lot of highly sensitive people. That's a really good way of, how to stop overthinking. Whether it be, as a result of feeling different feelings or just being in a work frenzy where we just tend to overthink things or we're up against challenges that make us overthink things and so on. And then writing for sure helps a lot of people.
Yeah, overthinking. That's a good point. I don't even think we realize how much we do overthink.
Right.
Another thing I like to do is listening to music and doing kind of a meaningless task instead of focusing on something that takes a lot of energy, like creating content or work related stuff. But to just turn on the music and wash dishes or just do something that doesn't take, it's just kind of mindless. That helps me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, music and what else? Yeah, I think a lot of it's just learning to be quiet with yourself. To stop the input, like not having to like for me, I'll often listen to a lot of podcasts, or I'll have to read something, or I'll just be taking in this content all the time, for like 15, 16 hours straight. And then I have to purposely, just make myself stop and not take anything else in.
Yeah. Less input. That
Yeah.
works. Yeah, for sure. And, when it comes to diet, if we can go back to food a little bit, what kind of diet would you recommend to highly sensitive people?
Well, I think everybody's different when it comes to diet, but I think the main things that apply to most people would be, to eat whole foods. I think that's really important, to stay away from sugar, eat more vegetables, of course. And yeah, I think the world we live in makes it a lot more difficult than it needs to be. I think just, eating whole foods and eating mostly a plant-based diet, staying away from processed foods and sugar. Yeah, so I think if we just stick to real food. I try and eat a lot of salads. Um, so just like I buy a big box of the the different greens that have like the chard and the spinach in it, and I buy a great big box of those, and I make smoothies with them, and I put them in with breakfast. I scramble, or I saute them with like turkey sausage, or I eat a lot of soup. I love soup, so that's a good way to get vegetables, and I love roasted vegetables. Yeah, so I try and stick to pretty much vegetables, and then I'll add in a little bit of protein, like fish or chicken, but I don't base my meal around the meat per se. I try and create meals that are like vegetarian or vegan, and then add meat to them. That's kind of how I try and structure my diet, and that makes sure I get more vegetables in. And I think sleep is really important. A lot of people are just not getting enough sleep nowadays. And I don't know about you, but that's probably my bane is not enough sleep. I fall apart if I don't have more than 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah, I totally get that. I keep saying to everyone, you cannot get too much sleep.
Do you take naps?
Yeah, I do.
I think and staying hydrated is another one. I think during the day we just don't drink enough water, and our energy level just goes way down, and sometimes that's really all, you're just dehydrated.
Yeah. So what else is there? If there's anything else, so we've mentioned, let's see what we've mentioned so far. So we have all the basics like food, like sleep, naps, taking care of ourselves, alone time.
Writing, getting things out of your head. That's good.
Yes. Yeah.
I think physical movement is really important. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. Just going for a walk or riding a bike or spending time in nature, I guess, going outside, movement and fresh air and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, from an energetic perspective, what happens is when we go for a walk, we move energy. So we're moving, so it's easier for us to process things, and we can get easily into meditative state. We can more easily be present with what we are feeling, and then we get clear on things because our thoughts become clear, and it does so many things at the same time. For some, it'll be walking, for some, riding the bicycle, for some, it'll be jogging. For some, it'll be yoga. Anything physical is great. Whenever we move the body, we are more present. We're actually right here, right now. And then whatever's going on within us, we're more aware of it. And also we can more easily let go of it. Could you just tell us what you do and the name of your podcast and the name of your website? And I'll make sure that I include the links in the description of this episode.
My podcast is Healthy and Creative. You can also find it on my blog, which is lareegriffith.com. My podcast is mainly for highly sensitive people and introverts, and it's all about health and wellness, and it just encompasses a little bit more for in health and wellness that surrounds that type of personality. I mean, it's actually good for anybody, but it's coming from a filter of highly sensitive people or introverts, and some of the challenges that we might have that are a little different from everybody else when it comes to taking care of ourselves in regards to nutrition and wellness.
Thanks so much again. And yeah, let's just keep applying self-care and do what we do and keep raising awareness because there's so much that can be done. And I think it all starts with self-care. Without self-care, I don't think we can do much.
Yeah.
There's no use knowing about energy of it or anything else for that matter if we don't apply any self-care. So self-care is really important. I think it's the number one thing for all highly sensitive people to be doing daily and weekly and regularly. That's all for this episode. Please subscribe to this podcast and share this with your friends and with others that you feel might benefit from tuning in. Also, please subscribe to BEnergyAware newsletter to make sure you receive more valuable content. Thanks, and talk to you in the next episode.